that as humans, as Christians, we sometimes, well, a lot of times we don't extend that kind of courtesy to each other. We all sin, right? And so none of us have the right to point our finger at anybody else in judgment, because judgment is the Lord's. And so I'm sure some of you have seen where there have been young ladies at our church who have gotten pregnant in their teenage years, and some of them will stay, but a lot of times they don't stay. I don't know if you've ever wondered why that is, but I can tell you from a family experience that a lot of times persons in the church, when this happens, we don't show them love. We don't show them that you made a mistake, something happened that was not in your plan, but guess what? You can still continue your journey. God is still with you. And so this evening, we are going to having Sister Rochelle, who is no stranger to our church. She is the PR and Communications Manager at the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, formerly the CDA. She's going to be sharing with us how we as a church can deal with this type of social issue, and how it is that we can help these young ladies and the young men as well, because a female cannot make herself pregnant. The young men who may fall into this trap, how we can help them back to the fold if they're left, and how we can keep them if it is that they are going through the situation right now. So as I said earlier, I wanted to keep an open heart and an open mind, and we want you to share with us in the latter part of the program if you have any suggestions or anything like that, or just anything that you think would be beneficial, any tools you may have used in the past, to share with us as we continue on in our ministry. Sister Rochelle, I am going to turn over to you, but before I do, I will be sharing a special.
Things change, plans fade. You look full of on a grandeur scale. Storms rise, hopes fade, and you place your bets on another day. When the going gets tough, when the ride's too rough, when you're just not sure enough, Jesus will still be there. His love will never change, sure as a steady rain. Jesus will still be there. When no one else is true, you'll still be loving me. When it looks like you've lost it all, and you haven't got a pearl, Jesus will still be there.
be there for us no matter what it is that we may be going through. And that's what we want to share this evening. Auntie Rochelle, over to you.
Hi, Auntie Natalie. Good afternoon, everybody. So good to be here to fellowship and to share with everyone. I just wanna use this opportunity first to thank all persons for prayers, and Brent and I have been doing much better. And for persons who know we have COVID-19, was a very rough situation. I definitely not sure why naysayers would say that there is no COVID, but there is. I can tell you because I'm going through it. But I'm glad that I'm able to share today. So it's good to have all of you on the platform, and just to say that this is gonna be a strong conversation, one that I want all of us to really chip in. I know we might have some doctors on the platform, and so there are some of the things that I may say I'm not a doctor, but based on research and just knowledge, working with the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, there are some things that I have knowledge of. All right. So I want to first of all start my presentation. I actually themed it as second chance, as Natalie mentioned, because that is what we need to do as a society, as family members, as parents, to give our youngsters a second chance. And so I want to first of all start off by just sharing with you a little bit about, what is happening in our country. Now, we know that there are a lot of societal beliefs. Most of us as parents want our children to be a good child, as we say, quote unquote, a good child. Oftentimes, a good child um, can only be accomplished or achieved if we are also good parents, or we practice what we call positive parenting. And so we're not blaming parents for things that happen to children. But what we're saying is if we have the strong support of family, including parents, both parents in the environment, whether it's a stepfather, stepmother, or biological, we find that children do have better outcomes. And we have seen it at the agency when you put a child in foster care placement versus a child in a children's home. So we know that our country is faced with a lot of things. There is violence impacting just the way our children operate in the spaces that they live. We also know that you're dealing with gangsters who sometimes will, and oftentimes, and we know about this, call, knock on your door in communities to say, your child is not ready to come and satisfy my urges. And so those are some of the things that we see happening. What we're also seeing is that a lot of our children are being employed into gang. I'm not sure how many persons saw the recent study on street children, but that really showed a grim picture of the things that are happening on the ground with our children. So the children you see at the stoplight, they work. Some of them go to school. It is very difficult as individuals to get those children off the streets, because what you find is that the financial gain is way better for them. Many of them tell you that they earn 20,000, 30,000. And so what you find is that young children are being employed into gangs. They are seeing the high life. And so they believe that that is the way to go. And the only way that they can do it is to be on the street, to be engaged in gang activities, to sell ammunition, to sell guns. Unfortunately, that is what is happening in our country. And so we have even seen that many of our girls, teenagers who do become pregnant, they too believe that a life of prostitution is the best way, because when they can earn $30,000, they can afford a Tory Burch slipper that they see. They can afford the lace front high definition wigs. And so that is how our children are being socialized to believe that the high life and what they see other persons have, especially with social media pictures that are posted on a daily basis, that's a lifestyle that they want, because that's a lifestyle that is attractive to them. So as parents, we have to make our lifestyle in our homes very attractive for our children. And so I want to start off my presentation with a video. And so this video I am sharing with you because it is a video that I produced in 2012 or 2015. And that's when I was working at Scotiabank. We produced a program called The Teller. And there's a program that we did called Girls Empowered for Motherhood and Success. And I'm sharing with you just for, Auntie Natalie, can you allow me to share, please? Right. I'm sharing with you this video because I want to start the presentation with this video and then I go into the discussion.
I'm okay. You're a co-host now.
Okay. So let me know if you can hear it. So it's about 5 minutes long.
Not hearing.
Not hearing?
No, no.
I'm just restarting. All right, I'm getting the audio sorted out. Just hold on, I don't want to start from the front. Just let me know when you can hear. Let me just start out the audio aspect.
Have you clicked on share sound?
Share sound. Hold on.
After you share the video, go to the right, you'll see about 2 or 3 dots or something like that. You put your thing there. You see a drop down, it says share sound.
All right, thank you, Pastor. Hearing now?
I got pregnant at 14, going on 15.
Yes, hearing.
Yes, I was always book smart, but not street smart. My parents didn't teach me certain things, and opposers might say that they were in the same situation and they didn't get pregnant. But at the end of the day, different persons will respond to the same situation in many different ways. So I would say it's the lack of parental guidance. When my father found out that I was pregnant, he got really angry, and I believe that at that time he was very much disappointed. He didn't speak to me until my son was like 6 or 7 months. That experience was a bit traumatizing, to be honest, because at that time people started to withdraw themselves from you because they see you as this person who, layman's term, your life done. Everybody telling you the same thing that I didn't know say she never breathe. You feel away in yourself because really and truly it's not something that you planned for. My mom, she couldn't manage financially because she's not working. I met this officer because we went to the station that's in the community. And when we went there, they referred us to Sissoko.
Good afternoon to you from Sissoko, Superintendent Russell speaking. How may I help you? The role of Sissoko meaning Center for the Investigation of Sexual Offences and Child Abuse, is really to accept reports coming to us, either from children, minors, or from adults who are raped, or under 16 girls, boys who are sexually abused. When an underage girl comes to Sissoko, she's pregnant. Our first job is to find out who is the person she's having sex with. There's a program that we call the diversion program. If this under 16 girl is having sex with somebody of her own age, we refer them to the Women's Center, and the Women's Center will do a series of investigations, counseling, and then give us a report that this person has benefited from that the diversion program.
My mom and I came up here and I started to attend classes.
Any girl anywhere in Jamaica who wants to continue her education, who is dropped out of school on account of a pregnancy, she can register with us. The mandate of the program is for them to access the program and then be reintegrated into the formal school system after the birth of their babies. The program was conceptualized in 1978, and it was the government's response then to the high rate of teenage pregnancy. At the time, the rate was around about 31%. The program constitutes academic instructions and extensive counseling on any topic you can imagine that relates to adolescence and human and sexuality, reproductive health, and rights and responsibilities. So the girls who come to the program are therefore within the school age cohort. So they are 17 and under. And there's nothing else we would rather do than help these young mothers. The resources are there to assist you, maximize those resources to help you.
The Child Development Agency has had a long-standing relationship with the Women's Center of Jamaica. We also have young ladies in our own care, in our institution, that are pregnant and have had children. We try to keep mother and child as close as possible together. And then they would go to the Women's Center to continue educational instructions and so on. Interestingly, when we can get the fathers, the Women's Center cater to the young men also.
We want every girl who is pregnant in Jamaica, every school-age girl who is pregnant, to access this process of intervention and go back to the formal school system.
I knew that I made a mistake, and I acknowledged that mistake, and I was willing to try to fix it. And I believe that I have, and I've worked with those problems even until now. And I don't think that they will ever go away until I achieve my goals one by one. I think I want to become an architect because I like the hands-on practical stuff. So I plan to go to UTech to do their architectural course, or go to HART to do their AutoCAD program, and then go to UTech. No matter how hard it gets, I never feel like giving up, because if I give up on my education, I don't want to give up on myself, but I give up on my baby.
You see, these girls are ambitious, contrary to popular belief, and they want it. They want their education. Several of the girls who access the program of intervention at the Women's Center complete their secondary education and matriculate for tertiary level institutions. We're so very proud of those girls.
It's rough. It's rough, trust me, because you have to balance school life plus motherhood. You can't spend too much time on a book and neglect your child.
When they come here, so many at first are angry. It's lack of parenting, why most of the girls get pregnant. Some of them mother is not much older than they are, They were teenagers when they got pregnant themselves. So you find a grandmother in the 20s.
Last year, 565 cases of sexual abuse with under 16 girls were reported. Just about 10% of them were pregnant.
Based on the reports from the Children's Registry, we have found that the whole question of neglect and sexual abuse and physical abuse has spiked over the last couple of years.
Since the start of 2015, we have already recorded 168 such cases, with another 10% being pregnant.
Each kit comes with 2 guides. I know that we're going to be working into...
All right. Let me. All right. All right, so I've cut the video because it goes into... All right, great. So that gives you an idea of a personal story. Actually, young lady is on the platform today. I'll introduce her later, and she will tell you where she's at now. I don't think she became the architect, but I can say that I'm so proud of King Sasha, because she's the perfect example of a teenage mom who is really doing well after receiving a second chance. So I'm now going to go through just some few slides. And when I go through these slides, we're gonna have a discussion, just a conversation. Natalie, let me know when you want to break, if there's a break, No? Okay, so I'll just go straight through, and then I'll introduce Kinsasha, who will tell you where she is at now, how she has turned around her life, and then we will open for questions. Yeah. All right, so everybody seen my screen? All right. So a second chance. Let us start by looking at what is puberty and what is teenage pregnancy. That's how I want to start the presentation today. All right, so puberty is when a child's body begins to develop and change as they become an adult. On average, we're saying that puberty begins at around 11 years old for girls, and for boys, we're seeing age 12. However, we're seeing many cases of girls and boys who have started puberty early as 8 years. And normally that period of puberty is between 8 to 12 years in both genders. Teenage pregnancy, which is also known as adolescent pregnancy, that is when a girl who is between the ages of 13 to 19 years or younger, because we're seeing 10-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 11, 12-year-olds who become pregnant, gets pregnant. All right, so what's the situation analysis? To the situation analysis, I'm sorry about the extra AL. All right, so I'm looking at it from a global perspective. I am also looking at it from Jamaica, the Jamaican perspective. The former head of Sissoka, Ian Ross, would have spoken about the numbers they saw in 2015. At the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, we receive on average 1,200 cases of child abuse on a monthly basis, and approximately 300 and something of those cases are sexual abuse cases. We are seeing that the hotspots are Hanover, Westmoreland, St. James, St. Mary, St. Anne. Both parishes have now come on the radar. We are seeing an increase in sex abuse in those two parishes, St. Mary and St. Anne. Kingston and St. Andrew, still the dominant parish, and St. Catherine is also a troubled parish. So we're seeing a lot of sexual abuse happening in those parishes that I mentioned, but overall increase in the number of abuse cases. However, we know that because there is a pandemic, you will find that there's a reduction in the number of cases. Still doesn't matter, because one child that is abused is a child who is in need of care and protection. All right, so in terms of the situation, of the estimated 5.6 million abortions, or let me start with the approximately 12 million girls aged 15 to 19 years, and at least 777,000 girls under 15 years give birth each year in developing regions, including Jamaica. I don't have specific breakdown of Jamaica, but if you look at that number, then Jamaica is somewhere within that fraction. We would have seen not so many pregnancies in comparison to 2015. Not saying that it's not happening, it could be happening, but underreported. But we are still seeing it. And once you see it in 1, 2, 3, up to 10, then there is an issue, right? At least 10 million unintended pregnancies occur each year among adolescent girls aged 15 to 19 years in the developing world. That's all the Caribbean islands. And then we're seeing that there are complications that sometimes lead to death of both the teenager and also the baby. And this is happening globally. In terms of a very hot topic that we're seeing, abortion, I know it was a long discussion in Parliament late last year as to what is to happen. And we know as a church, we are anti-abortion. And so in terms of what is happening across the world, we're seeing that of the estimated 5.6 million abortions that occur each year, they are among girls in the adolescent years, 15 to 19. 3.9 are unsafe, which means that they would have gone to, an illegal doctor who possibly doesn't know or wouldn't use the proper methods. And we find that that is causing a challenge in terms of mother may die, of course the child dies because it's an abortion, but also sometimes we find that persons or those mothers who when they get older, who want to have a child, then there are issues with having a child. Doctors are saying that adolescent mothers, once they start having sex early, having a child early, we're seeing that they are faced with higher risk of preeclampsia, or eclampsia rather, endometriosis, and the doctors on my platform will know exactly what these are. We're seeing systemic infection, than women aged 20 to 24 years, and babies of adolescent mothers face higher risk of low birth weight. And then we're seeing the preterm delivery and severe neonatal conditions. Okay. Right. All right. So teenage pregnancy in Jamaica. So our last check, which possibly would have been late last year, we're seeing a decline in the teenage pregnancy rates. 18% of all births in Jamaica occur teenagers. It's still alarming. The UNFPA speaks about this. If you go on their website, they have a wealth of information that speaks to what's happening in our country with teenage pregnancy. We're seeing that 67% of teenage pregnancies between the ages of 15 to 19 years were mistimed. Of course, I believe that, you have to plan for children. And so a child is 0 to 18 years, which means that they can't consent to sex, but 16, I understand, is the age of consent. For me, I am against that. I think that when a child becomes an adult, which is 18, that's the time that they have the mindset or have the willpower and ability to make good decisions. And I believe that that's the time that they should perhaps start dating and not necessarily get involved in sex. But that's my personal opinion. 5% of those were unwanted pregnancies, and 18% of the pregnancies in this age group were planned. So what we spoke about abortion earlier, we're looking at the Latin and the Caribbean, and we're saying that 2% of women of reproductive age reported having their first delivery before 15 years, right? Over 800,000 reported unsafe abortions in the region, and unsafe abortions we know contribute to maternal deaths. We see the damage to the pelvic floor, the preeclampsia, all of those things are happening. And our doctors on the platform will can concur, can add to this part of it. So when we look at issues with teenage pregnancy, there are several things that come into play. We have to look at the social issues. And the social issues, which is what we are seeing at the Child Protection and Family Services Agency. When a child presents to us, or a case is reported to the National Children's Registry, and then comes to our investigation unit, and the case says that the child is pregnant, oftentimes when you check to see where the father, who is the father, as Dr. Sims mentioned, who is this person that this child would have had sex with? Sometimes you find that it is someone who is in the community, much older, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times the senior of the child, and they can't be found. The child may tell you that, this is something that has been happening from a long time. The child is being sexually groomed in the sense that the man would have seen the child in the community, would have started, initiating some small talks. Small talks lead to whether exchange of contact information, text messages start. And then once the text messages start, then what you'll find is that the child now weakens to the pressure of this older person. We know that sometimes infatuation, love, that sort of thing is a sense that oftentimes our young persons will feel, and if you are not having the discussion with them as parents, then they won't understand what is right and what is wrong and what to feel and what not to feel and what to do if you're in the situation. So the conversations are starting the conversations early is very important. And I'll get into that a little bit. But when we check, oftentimes in communities, when we get those reports and investigators go out in the field, they tell you that they don't know. Parents will tell you, oh, I didn't know. The child will tell you, they give you a description of the gentleman, and you go with Sissoko into the community, you can't find the person. The carrier go around, the person would have fled the community. And so this is a teenage girl who has a child on the way, who has little or no support from this person. And you would have heard from Kinsasha's story. Her mother did not have the wherewithal to really support her. And so, education was her priority to ensure that she can provide for her child. So that is what you're seeing, that little or no support from their child's father in raising the child. And we know that it's important that you have both parents in a child's life. We find that children do better. There are better outcomes when that happens. One of the social issues too, there's a pause in their educational pursuit. So oftentimes the girls are the ones who have to stop school. They are the ones who have the growing tummy. And once you're in the formal school system, the school system does not allow for pregnant girls to attend, which is why the Women's Center is important, because the Women's Center allows the girls to attend school with their tummies, with the unborn child. And so they are able to continue their education until they give birth and they can rejoin the formal education system. So we find that there's a pause in the educational pursuits. They now have to think about a child and not so much about their education. But also we find that when you have paused your educational pursuit, not all the times there is the confidence or the push, the drive to continue. So what you find is that oftentimes our teenage moms may just get very demotivated about restarting school, and then they become unable to really provide financially, because without an education you can't get a job. And so this child now has a mother who can't fend for herself and who can't fend for this child, his or her. What you also find too is that in situations like these, sometimes you'll find that girls go out in search of someone to assist. In search of some. Can I ask that person to just mute their mic, please? Thanks. Right. They go out in search for someone to assist, and in doing that, they end up becoming pregnant a second time. And that's what we definitely don't want to have happening, the second pregnancies. When we look at health issues, we spoke a little bit about that earlier. The early childbearing can increase risk for the newborn and also the young mother. The babies born to mothers under 20 years of age face higher risk. We had mentioned the low birth and the severe neonatal conditions. We also see that pregnant teens also have a higher chance of becoming anemic. And we know that anemia is a reduction in the number of red blood cells. And I'm sure it's sort of explanatory, because you know that when a person gives birth or is pregnant, the baby needs to get a lot of nutrients. And the doctors who are on our platform, probably Dr. Price, if he's on, could explain a little bit more as to what happens when someone becomes pregnant. But the child now feeds off your body, and so you have to have your antenatal checkups, and you have to take your supplements and those things to ensure that baby is of good weight and good health. But also for legal issues, which is important as well. We find that our teenage fathers become at risk of being arrested and charged, because we know that by law, under the Child Care Protection Act, a child is 0 to 18 years and a child cannot consent to sex. And once you go to a child who's 0 to 18 years, then you are going to be in trouble. So once the police goes and do their investigation and you're found, you will be held culpable. And so we find that our boys will be arrested and charged. And see, the impact of it is that, so the child has a mother who can't care effectively for him or her. And then you're now looking at a father who is locked up, can't work, or maybe drop out of school too, and unable to continue his education, and so that he can support his family. So it's always important that we try as best as possible to prevent these things from happening. And I'll speak about that in my next 2 slides from now. All right, so in terms of what is the state's response to teenage pregnancy, and I'm gonna, these listing of institutions are the ones who work with children, work with perpetrators, and also work with the family, because it's very important when you have situations like these, girls becoming pregnant, we have to ensure that all the state agencies are working simultaneously, handing off the various processes so that at the end of the day, this child is in need of care and protection because he would have committed an act, she would have then be the victim of the act, and a child is now in the picture. And this is a child who can't fend for him or herself, which means that the child is in need of care and protection, right? So we're seeing that the Center for the Investigation of Sexual Offences and Child Abuse, CISOCA. So let me tell you a little bit about CISOCA. CISOCA was established in Jamaica in 1989, and it is within the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and it's a response to the need for police sensitivity to victims of sexual assault, for improved confidentiality in taking reports from victims in order to allow for speedy and effective investigation of sexual offenses, to create an atmosphere which encourages victims to report incidents of sexual offenses, and to assist in enhancing the rehabilitation of victims through counseling and therapy. Now, once a child goes to CISOCA, what should happen, and oftentimes happen, is that there is a report that takes place. The CPFSA has an officer or an investigator who sits in the CISOCA office. This is what we call the multi-agency approach. And the multi-agency is important because what you don't want is that a child is raped, a child is in a traumatic state, not knowing what happened to her. And so in this case, because we're talking about pregnancy, and so it's important that you have all the players sitting around the table who can take the report one time. So you're not re-traumatizing this child all over, who has to speak to 10 different people to get information. So you have all the players sitting around a table. So we have an officer who sits in CISOCA, who once a child comes in, if the child, as I said, would have been raped, as we say, sexually abused or abused generally, the information is taken by all agencies who will then act. So that's what CISOCA deals with, the criminal aspect. The CISOCA's role is to ensure that the person who does this to the child is then held accountable. So they will go and they do their investigation, go into the community, talk to people, interview them, find out, what was happening with this child before, who, was in contact with the child, all of those various things that will lead to a charge, someone being charged and someone being arrested, charged and arrested, right? Or arrested and charged. And then the CPFSA now, we deal with the social aspect of it. So we work with CISOCA to get the child back on their feet. So the child would have spoken about the matter, they would have taken the statement. The CPFSA officer's responsibility is to ensure that, one, you go into the environment where the child is. So you sit with parent, you sit with our guardian and say, okay, so the child was brought to us today, this is the situation, child was raped. Similar situation that CISOCA would do in terms of their investigation, but for the CPFSA, it's more from a social aspect. So what is next for this child? So the child is pregnant, you have the conversation with the family. Can you care for the child? Can you care for the child's baby? Right? What is the family setting like? So you'd have to go and do a home assessment. So the home assessment looks at, is the family living in a board house, concrete house, how many bedrooms, running water, is there electricity, proper sanitary convenience, is there a dedicated space that this baby can be kept? What is the financial status of the family? Those are things that we look at. Now, oftentimes when you go to the home environment, which is why I have Mary's Child in bracket beside the CPFSA, is that the mother or the father or caregiver will say, I don't want her here because she was running up and down with X person, and I would have spoken to her about it, and she's still doing it, still doing it, still doing it. And so I don't business with her. She must know how she went to take care of this child, but I don't want her in my home. So the next response for us, because sometimes when you speak to family members and they give you that standoffish sort of response, you have to now think about plan B. You will negotiate with mother and father or caregiver and say, listen, she would have done something wrong, give her a second chance. Some of them will not budge as to what they believe is the right thing, that the child needs to go out a road and suffer and be able to understand what sacrificing is. And so our response can't be that. It is to look at the next way or the next option for this child. So the next option would be to look at if there are any family members around, whether it's an aunt, an uncle, brother, sister, older, who can care for this child and the unborn. And if you can't find anybody, then you have to place the child at a children's home that caters for pregnant girls. So there's a children's home that caters for pregnant girls, and it's called Mary's Child, right? And Mary's Child is located in Papine. It's on your way to the University Hospital of the West Indies. It's on your left-hand side. It's adjoining a church, but it's a part of the Mustard Seed community. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Mary's Child. So Mary's Child is a program under the Mustard Seed Communities. It's a residential facility for teen moms, and it accommodates 12 mothers and their babies for 1 year. So Mary's Child keep them for 1 year, and then the aim is that you work with the child and their baby for 1 year, and then they have to be placed elsewhere. Oftentimes we would by then have established a relationship with mother and father or caregiver, because it would have given them a year just to rethink what they would have said and to negotiate as best as possible. If not, then we place them with another family member once they have the wherewithal to care for them. So Mary's Child offers training for them, professional and personal development, including computer courses, home economic classes, and informational lectures on parenting skills. So that is also important, because these are teenage moms who know nothing about having a baby. And so you have to prepare them to know how to breastfeed, how to make bottles, how to change a diaper, all of those things. But of course, we know when they go to the clinic visits, those are things that they are taught, because I know for sure that those things happen at the university and other Victoria Jubilee hospitals and those institutions. So each mother is also immersed in opportunities for spiritual development. And so that's what Mary's Child offers those moms. Now, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, they are extremely important in teenage moms' lives, because once they go to the Women's Center to continue their education while they are pregnant, the Ministry of Education now has to be reached out to, or they now have to come in to say, we're writing to say that this child would have dropped out of school. We're seeking a school for this child to replace her. And even here, even the CPFSA does that at times. When the child drops out, they go to Women's Center, all of that. We now work with the Ministry of Education to see what school could take in this child. Sometimes they're over the age, or probably close to over the age, in terms of the age difference, because some of them would have been out for a year. And so we have to work closely with the ministry and with the school that they that they will be attending. The Ministry of Health and Wellness through the National Family Planning Board, they're also important. National Family Planning Board is developing campaigns to really effect change, what we say behavior change in our children. And so they have a behavior change campaign that is coming up called Live Life Before You Give Life. And it is aimed at preventing pregnancy, especially second pregnancies in adolescent girls. We're not seeing a lot of that, but we're still seeing some cases where there are second pregnancies. So this campaign by the National Family Planning Board is to ensure that there are no second pregnancies, but also going to communities to talk to our young persons about safe sex, abstinence, which is very important, and the way forward for many of them who would have started sexual activity early, and perhaps educating them about sexual transmitting illnesses, STIs. And so that's what the National Family Planning Board does, go on the ground and ensure that our youngsters get the information. Now, the Ministry of Gender, Culture, Entertainment and Sports, they are the ones who are in charge of the Women's Center of Jamaica. That their responsibility is to ensure that they get their children or young mothers back on track. It was established in 1978 in response to the high level of teenage pregnancy experienced by the country. And they have served so far over 46,000 teen moms, many of whom have successfully completed their secondary education. And they have been pushing that the deterrent to ensure that teenage pregnancy remains low, or that our teenage moms continue their education, is to talk to them about what are the possibilities. So the possibilities are HIV infection, their STIs, their dying before seeing your child materialize into a woman or a man. So those are the things that the Women's Center does. They can't force the girls to take contraception. They normally get the approval from the family members because they're children and they can't give consent. And we know that, you have the oral contraceptives, you have the ones that you can surgically implant, whether it's the one in the arm or the one inside the vagina. And so that's what the Women's Center of Jamaica Foundation has been encouraging our young mothers that think your education, focus on that. In terms of the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Justice has a program called Victim Services Division. Victim Services Counseling Program within the Victim Services Division. And so if the case goes to CISOCA, the CPFSA gets involved, the child goes to Women's Center, the child is in need of continued counseling support, the Victim Services Division provides that support for this teenage mom, so that they can understand what is happening to them, how to move on with their life, how to realize that they're getting a second chance and to really capitalize on that second chance. So the Victim Services Division does the ongoing follow-up counseling intervention with this teenage mom. The Ministry of Labor and Social Security, it should be, they also have the PATH program. And the PATH program, we know oftentimes it is important that we assess what is the situation. So for example, when the CPFSA goes into a family setting where there's a teenage mom, so say mother and father can keep the child or can keep the children, then we of course have to look at what is their financial status. I would have mentioned that earlier. Now, sometimes when you go and you look at the financial status and just look at the conditions under which the family lives, there are other interventions that you have to do. You might have to partner with Food for the Poor to see if the family has land and can Food for the Poor assist with probably building a bathroom or a better, sanitary convenience. Is there a kitchen that is not there? Maybe they're cooking on the outside. That is something too that we would forge partnership with Food for the Poor to see if they can assist with building whatever is needed in the environment to ensure that child and newborn are in a good environment. So the PATH program comes in if you realize that the family needs financial support, and of course you have to go through the application process. Oftentimes when we as a CPFSA goes to the home, we do the home assessment and realize that there's a shortfall in terms of financial status, we will also intervene in PATH and say to PATH, we would have gotten this report, we would have acted on it, the family definitely is in need of this financial support, and you find that it expedites the process oftentimes so that they can get the help that they need. All right, so in terms of preventative measures, I want to spend maybe about 7 minutes talking about this because some of them are personal measures for me. I have an 8-year-old, almost 9-year-old, but I also have very close youngsters who I work with or communicate with who sometimes reach out to me about issues that they're facing. And so we want to ensure that as a church, as individuals within our home space, in our communities, we don't turn a blind eye to things that are happening. I have been on the road and I've seen children at our street lights. I've seen children walking in communities. I've seen children holding hand with a bigger man, and I'm not afraid to stop and ask what is happening here. You know, I recently saw a gentleman and a younger girl at a location that I went to, maybe about 3-4 weeks ago. And when I saw them, I said, this girl looks young, but they were holding hands. And sometimes it's just so unfortunate because of the situations that we face as a country. I wasn't able to tell if it's child's father or if it's really her spouse, but he was really a very much older man than her. But, you know, sometimes I just whisper a word and say, God, just handle it if that's a situation. And we often have to do that, but we can't turn a blind eye. So I'm just saying to us as church members, be nosy. People will say that you're very facetious. Are you enough? Are you a village lawyer? The village is what we need to build our children. So if we have to become village lawyers to safeguard our children, that's what we have to do, right? So my preventative measures and what I share with, and I'll share some additional ones as well, is that we definitely have to start talking to our children about puberty and sex from an early age. From the child reaches an age of maybe about 3, 2 years old, 2 years old, 3, and you're gonna get them out into the environment, or you're bringing people into their environment, especially when you have helpers coming in, especially when you have persons who you are going out back into the work environment and you have to leave them with a helper, you have to leave them with a family member. I'm not saying that you're not to trust your family members, but you sometimes as adults, we have to ensure that we be very, I wouldn't say overprotective, but we have to question the people who spend time with our children, right? And so you may not be able to question the person about the child, because anybody who is doing something to a child will not tell you that they're doing it because they know that it is wrong and they're gonna get into trouble. So from the child reaches age 2, start the conversation, not about puberty, but about good touch and bad touch. So you play, so 2-year-old who have cognitive, skills and everything in tune, start the songs. So you're in the shower or you're in the bath with them and you have the rubber ducky and you squirt the water and you sing song and you play, sing, make up some songs, play games with them, that sort of thing. And you say, touch and say, oh no, or you touch a private area and say, oh no, that's a no area, no zone, no. So from early we start creative ways of teaching them about their private parts and use the names, right? Use the names. Do not be afraid to tell them that the parts, that this is breast, this is chest, this is vagina, this is penis. And I'll share a quick story with you why it is important to use the names. And sometimes we believe that, we're Christians and there are certain things that we're not supposed to talk about. We are supposed to talk about these things, because if you don't talk about it to the child, then the child is going to go to the road and learn it from somebody else. It's important that you start the conversations. So as early as age 2, start the discussion. When my daughter started school at age 3, I started the song, the no-go song. was what I sang with her every morning. I bathe her. Every evening she come back from school, I talk about the no-go song. No go, no, 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 don't touch me, no go. That is how I made up song and I taught her. And I tell her, I said, baby, nobody is to touch you here. If somebody touches you, what are you supposed to do? And you ask them the question because you want to make sure that if it happens, God forbid, if it happens, let them be able to tell you. So it is important that even when you take the people in the home environment to care for them, you want to make sure that they still are on the lookout of the no-go places. Nobody's to touch you here, nobody's to rub here, nobody's to this. Very important. And as they go older, try at least build a routine. Every 2 months you have the conversation, every month you have the conversation. When you're bathing, try and have the conversation. As early as possible, we say to parents, teach the children how to bathe themselves. So they're not going to be perfect at bathing themselves, you know. And you have to look at the age of the child because every child is different. So if you have a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, seems to be very active and very alert and everything, and you say, okay, they know about the rag, they know about the soap, they know about those things. It is not hard for you to teach them how to bathe. And you show them, you know, wash your arm, wash your neck, wash the areas, rinse off. They're going to splash the place, but it can be wiped up afterwards, right? But it's important. So the first preventative thing I have here, pointer I have here on this, is that we need to start talking to our children early about puberty and sex, right? Why it is important to talk about the private parts from early, and I mentioned that in terms of the names, because I remember there is a case of an 8-year-old girl who lived on Job Lane, and that little girl was being sexually abused by her uncle. And unfortunately, brothers and sisters, and that thing really hurt me to the core. That little girl was reintegrated with her family. So the uncle is the father's brother. It was actually a very public case. The uncle is the father's brother, but they live in as I said, Job Lane. Job Lane is not an easy community, right? And so what we found was that when the child went to court or gave the statement to the officers, the child keep mentioning about a yam, chocho, and all of those various names. And they could, the officers knew that's what she was talking about, but you're trying to use play therapy because this is an 8-year-old. You say you use the dolls and you touch the parts and you say, okay, baby, tell me which part did he touch you? And you show them the dolls. So you start your conversation with them and they will say to you, oh, he touched me here, show me on the doll. And they touch the breast on the doll, they touch the vagina area on the doll. And that's how the officers who are trained in play therapy work with children to get a better understanding. But this child kept on mentioning about something feel like a stone, something feel like a yam that went into her apple. And then she started mentioning about chocho and all of those things. And I say it is so unfortunate because these are the things that cause. So apart from witnesses who don't want to come forward, a child is unable to give a proper story about what has taken place with her. And this is an 8-year-old. Because what? Parents fail to teach a child about what private parts are. Your private parts are your breast, your vagina, your chest, your buttocks. Those are no-go areas and you teach them every day. You teach them as often as you can. You bathe them and you talk to them about those areas. Very important. So when the child reaches 10, 12, 13, into those teenage years, and even from 10, because know that they're on the gadgets, they're seeing a lot of things pop up. We have to ensure that we are monitoring what they're watching on screen. But now that we are in a pandemic and the children are using the tablets or they're using the general gadgets, it's important to start the conversation from early so that they know if they see something pop up, they must come and talk to you about it. So we're saying start talking to the children early. So be as open as possible. So when a child gets a certain age, you know that the hormones are gonna kick in, puberty is happening and all of those things. Speak about the consequences of sex because remember now you would have started the conversation from there early about good touch and bad touch, no-go zones. Now when they get into the age now that you know that puberty is on, talk to them about the consequences of sex. So you talk to them about sex, you talk to them about the consequences of sex, what will happen, right? So sometimes children will ask, like my daughter always ask about why she can't get a baby sister and or a brother, right? And I just sit her down and I tell her, I said, well, first of all, mommy and daddy we have to plan for a baby sister or a baby brother. It's very expensive, and then mommy has to tummy is gonna grow, and you know it will be a painful process. You know, I have as much as possible an open conversation so they know. And you know, I remember when I was in high school, because my parents did not teach me about sex. It was when I went into high school that my I think it was health and family life teacher spoke about sex. And I was saying to myself, I'm confused because all this time I keep hearing my mother talk to me about helicopter come with baby and drop baby. And I don't know how many persons on this platform. I'm not very old, but that's the conversation I recall my mother having with me about how babies come. Because I was very inquisitive when I was much younger. And I used to ask questions. And she told me that that's what her mother told her, right? And so we are saying that this is not the age to tell children about helicopter come and drop baby. We need to have frank conversations with them. When a man does X and a woman does X, it must be done in marriage, and why it must be done in marriage, and all of those things. And if you do it outside of marriage, or if you do it too early, these are the consequences of it. Baby will come, you're not working, you can get HIV, you can get an STI. Have the frank discussions with the children. Do not we call it now. Don't brainwash them, and don't water down any conversation. Be as open as possible, but I mean curb the conversations, but ensure that they understand. And sometimes you can ask them the question, you know, how you feel about that. Very important. So that's one of the preventative measures. Also importantly, get them involved in various activities. So church has activities, there are extracurricular activities at school. Very important. Get them in as much activities as possible. But I want to also add a little caution for this part. So whilst they get into the activities at church and at school, we want to ensure that we continue the conversations with them about the good touch and bad touch, because we know that in the society that we live in, our churches, good institutions, foundations for good family values, but we know that the people sometimes may not be ideal. So, you know, somebody may be perfect today as whether an elder or a brother or a pastor, and then next couple of days he decides that he's gonna touch an underage girl. So we have to ensure that we continue the conversation with our children while they do extracurricular activities. So the child goes to a mixed school, you have the conversation with them about the mixed school, right? Very important. And in speaking about the mixed school, let me delve a little in terms of relationships. I don't believe that our children should start relationships until they are about age 18. That's my personal belief, right? So they will come and they talk about, oh, this guy liked me at school, or oh, this girl liked me at school. I think that as Christian members and believers, we should discourage that sort of relationship so early. Our children can have friends, but I think that until they get to the age of adulthood, it's hard for them to make a decision, because you see, once they start talk about, oh, this boy like me, this girl like me, feelings start, and then they say, oh, he loves me, and then the love gone into something else, and then they're on the gadgets and they're watching things and they're seeing things play out, and they're not sure what to do, but they know that they want to try it because it seemed like it looked good and people talking about it, all of those things. I don't think that they should start any relationship, whether you say you're gonna have a friend, or don't start it till age 18. That's when you're an adult, you can start having conversation with a boy. At age 18, just friendship, nothing serious, right? So I know sometimes parents may be a little shy from having those discussions, but it's important to do that. Know their friends and develop a good relationship with their friends' parents. That's one of the key areas. We have to know our children's friends, develop a good relationship with their friends' parents. So if they're around the friends, we know that the parents are aware that they're around the friends. You can call the parents, you can feel out the parents, because sometimes, to be honest, some children are just not good enough for, I wouldn't say good enough. Sometimes there are some children who are, based on their socialization, they may be a little outside of what you would have set for your child. Not good. But I believe that as a parent, it is an opportunity for you to build a relationship with that parent. And so you can perhaps give some pointers or become a mentor to that parent to see how best they can now help their children. Because sometimes as parents, we sometimes need answers. We sometimes need help. We want a second opinion on matters. And so it is important that we don't just sit down and say, oh, you know, the neighbor there, not like our pitney. She teach her, have her pitney them and wear short up clothes. No. Build a relationship with the parent and have the discussion with them and say, boy, you know, I'm your neighbor, so introduce yourself if you're not so familiar with the person. Build a relationship. Because sometimes what I find is that when you start to do the right thing and people see you doing the right thing, sometimes they start doing the right thing. So they may see that your child is modestly dressed, even though modesty in dressing and nudity, sometimes it's sort of twisted, because you may have a youngster who is nudely dressed, and you may have a youngster who is modestly dressed, and it's a modestly dressed one gets pregnant. So that's why it's important that we still have to have the conversations. We can't forget, cannot emphasize any much more that the conversations must be ongoing. Doesn't matter the age of the child. I don't allow sleepovers. I know sometimes sleepovers are allowed. Parents may be comfortable with children doing sleepovers, but I just want to go back to the point before the sleepovers, that ensure that you know the friends and you develop a relationship with the parents. I tell you why I don't like sleepovers. I don't like sleepovers because oftentimes it's a child who is not exposed, ends up being abused. And we have had many situations where we hear of the child went over that house to go study, and then the brother come. There was even a recent case with a 13-year-old in St. Catherine. She said she never have any internet. She have the device, but she never have the internet. And she went to the mother and said to the mother, Mommy, I'm gonna go by X house to use her internet because classes started. And while she went to the friend's house to use the internet, was in class and everything, took a break from class, the friend's brother or his cousin or whatever came by the house, and the guy saw the girl, and he was there praying on her. The following day, she goes back to the house to use the internet, and he held her down into the house. And it is so unfortunate, because guess what happened? The friend's cousin asked the friend, as in the child who is living in the house that has the internet, can you go to the shop and buy something for me? The friend leaves, goes to the shop, the girl is in her online class, and the cousin decides to rape the girl. And this is a 13-year-old. I got that case about probably 2 months ago in St. Catherine. So we have to be mindful of those things. And so that is why, for me, I don't trust sleepovers, because normally, sometimes it's just so unfortunate when the sleepover happen, a strange person come into the home, you never know, so this person was coming into the home, they see your child, and then they decide, and then don't believe that it's just the girls. We're focusing on the girls today because they are the ones who can get pregnant. But we're also seeing it where this is also happening to the boys. We're seeing the bugger cases going up, right? So we have to be mindful that whilst we protect the girls, we also have to protect our boys. So the same conversation we have with the girls is the same conversation we need to be having with our boys. That's a situation now that our country is in. That the conversation has to be right across the board, boys or girls. But for the girls today, because we are talking about pregnancy. And then I talk about doing monthly check-ins. So the monthly check-ins is for me, I one of the things that I will do when I get to that stage is I keep a calendar, a period calendar, as some of us female parents on the platform may do that for ourselves, we do that also for our children. And we talk to them about why it is important to do that. And you do your monthly check-ins as well. You know, how are you feeling today? You know, are you having issues? Are you having cramps? Are you having, you know, fatigue? You know, those sort of things. Ask the questions. Just because what you want to do is to ensure that you're building a relationship with them, that they feel so comfortable. If they at any time feel that there is a question, a burning question that they need to ask, because normally when children are thinking about doing something, they start by teasing with some questions. Oftentimes you'll find that they start by teasing questions. They come and they will ask you one thing, and they come and they listen to what you have to say, and then they come again and they ask another thing. But sometimes now we are scared because we are so busy, we don't pick up with what they're saying. So it is important that we look at, you know, stop sometimes and ask why you ask. And just if you realize that this is a time now to have conversation, to go ahead and have the conversations. Don't stop to have the conversations. Do it right there and then, have the conversation so you can get a better understanding of why the child is asking these questions. Right. So the other thing too is we want to make sure that, and I think I probably would have mentioned it in another presentation, that we want to ensure that we give our children exposure, good exposure. So we have activities at church, we take them to church so that they can understand what is happening at church. We're doing volunteerism, maybe community beach cleanup, take them with you to the community beach cleanup, let them clean. Don't leave them at home and let them go on the gadgets and they can call any friend. Get them involved in community activities with you, take them with you as many places that are suitable for children. Ensure that we do that. So let me see, I am seeing a couple of things in there. Okay. All right, I'm seeing some questions here. Right, all right, some comments. All right, so I guess Natalie will deal with that. But that is, you know, those are some of the things that I would definitely want to share with us. And in terms of as a church, I am trying to go to the presentation. All right, so I am not seeing that part of the presentation, but on what I had, hold on 1 second. I had a section that speaks to what the church could do. Just go back. Give me a few minutes. Let me. All right, so let me in the interest of time, because I want to go to questions and we're now at 6:09. In terms of what the church can do, these are some of the things that I would recommend that our church does. And I know that New Haven has a wealth of programs for our youngsters. I know Pathfinder is one of those that I admire a lot because I've seen improvement in my daughter since she has been a part of Pathfindering. So it's important that we get them involved in as many of our programs that we have. So in terms of the church, this is what I am asking the church to do. So for our youth groups, we want to ensure that we design programs, interactive programs for them, and talk to them about sex education, have sex education sessions that may have happened, or there may be plans for that, but it is important that we do that as a church, right? Every now and you know, again, we have a special seminar, webinar, whatever we want to call it, and we play games with them, those sort of things, that so that they can get the information. If they're not getting it from home, they're not getting it from school, we want to make sure that as a church, we are providing accurate information to them, and we don't allow for friends and other persons who are lurking on the street corners in the communities to talk to them or to give them wrong information, right? What we also want to ensure as a church that we do for our teenage moms but not more for teenage one, because for me, it is being proactive. It is how we're going to prevent it as a church. So I'm still in the preventative measures, right? But looking at what the church can do in preventing, right? We can try, but it may not work, but we would have tried. We are also saying that sometimes we might have gut feelings about children in our church, maybe going down the wrong path, but sometimes we may delay. Not important. It's not good to delay. Don't be afraid to stop and ask the question. Pull the child one side just to have, general discussion. How is your home going? How are you? How is school? Start the conversation, and you touch them this week and you say, all right, next Sabbath again, I'm going to touch about that young girl today again. I'm going to ask her a couple more questions. And so you ask her another question. So how was school this week? Do you have exams? Are you doing CSEC? Start the conversation, right? I know sometimes we may think that persons may see us talking, especially if it's a male member of the church and it's a female, persons may see you talking to this youngster every week and may start to think things, but we have to start thinking objectively and to sit and see if we can perhaps devise a program that everybody is on the same page. So when they see things happening, they don't look at it as being suspicious of it, right? The other thing that the church can do, so in speaking about that, I'm talking about providing counseling support for troubled children. But sometimes you can see a child and you say, something off with this child, I think I need to talk to this child. If you have provisions for counseling, introduce it to the child. Don't wait for them to tell you they need the counseling. Sometimes it may be difficult because some of our children want to run away from things like those. But you see, in sparking the conversations before, I think they would have built that sort of relationship or built the trust to know that whatever you're saying to them is for their good. And sometimes you have to tell them, what I'm trying to help you. And I want to help you. I want to steer you because I want you to be successful. I don't want you to do something that is going to be detrimental to your future. Just have the frank discussion. We also have been encouraging our church members to report any suspected or known case of child abuse, right? We go into communities and we go to drop off with our track or to build a conversation. We see something in the yard that doesn't look so right, don't be afraid. If you suspect that something is not right, let the agencies go and investigate. It is better they investigate and it is not the right thing, or what you reported was not correct, but let those agencies make the decision. When you go to homes and you have a gut feeling that something is not right, or if you see a child and you say something is not right, but you personally don't want to deal with the situation, don't be afraid to report it. And we have a new reporting of child abuse line at the CPFSA, and that's 211. So you can call it. It's toll free, 24 hours, confidential. You don't have to give your name. All we need to know is the child's name, where the child lives, give us some directions as to where we can find the child. Some directions could be that maybe the house doesn't have a number on it, but maybe it's a pink house with a blue drum in front of it, or maybe it's a brown house with a yellow drum on top of it. Those are some of the landmarks that you can give, or maybe it is a house beside a gas station or 2 blocks from the gas station. Those are some things that we ask that you give. But once you suspect or you know of something not right with a child in a home, your duty as a Jamaican who wants to see our children do well, and if we're going to reduce the levels of teenage pregnancy, which is another unwanted child coming into this world who might not have a father or might not have a father who can provide the support as best as possible, let us tackle it from before and be as proactive as possible. And the final point I have for our church and for churches in general, we should design a support program for parents, right? We can begin a parent mentorship program. I know Elder Berry is in charge of the family program at church, but let us see, and perhaps this is something that you have already had or designed, Elder Berry, but I think because of what we're facing now, it is important for us to design a support program for our parents, because sometimes parents need help with parenting. They want to hear what other parents are doing. They are able to share and say, you know, this is what I'm encountering. My child is 13 years old. This is what I'm going through. What is it that other 13-year-old parents are doing to tackle the issue that you're seeing in your child? Sometimes, you know, it really helps when you share what's happening, and then you find that other persons are going through the same thing. So it's important that we have those targeted things that can help our parents and our children, if we really want to tackle this issue. And just think about it. If all our churches, all our NGOs, all our agencies, if everybody, every community across the length and breadth of our country were to think proactively, just think about the impact that we would have on our children. We would not have have a need for a CISOCA. We would not have the need for a CPFSA to provide children with counseling, and a lot of social workers, and the need for more social workers, and all the things that perhaps Dr. Price would see at his hospital. So many things and trauma that are happening with our children, and surgeries that we have to do to mend back broken children, and not to mention the cost that the country pays. We as taxpayers are the ones who are funding all of these programs that are in place for children who have been broken. And we know the saying that, you know, it's easier to mend, or it's easier to build a child to be successful, to be a high achiever, than to really mend our children who are broken. So I end with my last few words, because I want King Sasha to come in and speak a little bit about her journey, having left the Women's Center of Jamaica, and to allow for questions and answers. But I close by saying that, you know, I have seen so many cases. We have seen situations that so many of our children are faced with STIs, with unwanted pregnancies, with so many things. And it really is hurtful, because oftentimes you can only write a report, you can write a press release to say what you're doing, but at the end of the day, there's a child who is really in need. And there are so many things that we see in psychological impact, or the mental impact, that, you know, when a child is abused, what happens to this child? And I've had so many stories from wards of the state who I've interacted with, who become pregnant. Some of them don't become pregnant. They either get HIV or they get an STI. And they tell you that, you know, I just don't know, what did I do wrong? I came into this world, I thought that the world was gonna protect me. And then all of a sudden, I have a man or I have a woman who's forcing me to do something that I don't want to do. And then here you guys come, everybody's asking me questions, everybody is they're taking me out of my home environment. I have to go to a children's home, and they start to blame themselves that they did something wrong. And it's hard to mend those children. So what you find is that these children cut themselves. They're the ones where you have to be careful. You can't put sheet on the bed. You can't put any strings in the rooms with them. You can't put any ceiling fan in the rooms, because you can one day possibly come back and see them hanging from a ceiling, hanging from a bathroom window, hanging from a grill. And so there's so many things that we have to think about. And so I'm imploring all of our members on this platform, and whatever is shared here today is something that you should share with other persons, right? Don't just keep the information to yourself. Have the conversations, create your own safety system in your home or in your community. Be the one who is going to be the voice for all the children in your community. Start the conversation with them. Start the conversation with parents. We see a parent out of the way, go and have the conversation. You see a child out of the way, have the conversation. Nothing is wrong to have the conversation. All persons can cuss and say, go on about your business, right? But you would have done what you can do. And if you see something that you cannot handle, then it's very good, or it's very important to report it, right? So I just want to say that we just need to, as a country, protect our children more. Our children are not being protected, I can tell you that. Not being protected as much as we think. Until a child is raped, killed, or something, we are all running up and down like headless chickens. It is on the headlines. It is in the paper. It's another story for the Gleaner and for the Star and for the Observer. But the child who could have been the next pastor, the next elder, the next leader of the choir is the one that we have to think about. And we can't continue to lose any more of our children. Because when you start to kill the children, you start to take away the life, the prime life of children, then you're going to end up with the ills that you're seeing in our society. Youngsters or younger men are involved in ammunition, are involved in selling of guns, involved in drugs, involved in prostitution, involved in all the things that we are seeing. So our responsibility as a church, if we can at least reach out to one child, ensure that we keep that one child, in our bosom, work with them, keep them as safe as possible, talk to the parents. When you see things not going right, just think about the difference that we can make. And I think New Haven Seventh-day Adventist Church will and can be, for our 50th anniversary, be that church to launch this massive campaign that is going to be looking after our children in the way that we need to. We can't afford for our children to have to carry children who they have no clue about taking care of. Many of us here on this platform, when we have to go through pregnancy with our children at the age that we are, at the right age, within a marriage, with the good support, we also have issues. So think about a child whose body is not ready for a child, whose mind is not ready for a child, what they have to encounter. All right, so thank you so much for listening. I am going to now stop sharing, and I am going to ask Kinsasha if she's on the platform. Kinsasha, you're on. If you could just share with us, turn on your mic, she's on, awesome. If you can just share with the New Haven family, what has been Kinsasha's life since I last spoke to you in that interview in 2015. So I'll now mute so you can talk.
First, I want to say good evening to everyone and thank you so much for having me. I want to start off with this quote that I hold so dearly to my heart, and it's faith is taking the first step without seeing the entire staircase. I mean, it's 2021, and looking back at the younger version of myself in that interview, it reminds me so much. It takes me back to who I was before, and I can see a massive difference in who I am now. The girl that I was looking at, I am no longer the person that was scared. When I met you in 2015, I think it was around the time that I was supposed to sit my CXC exams. And it's funny enough, I did that interview, but I wasn't sure how my CXC fees were going to be paid. But it's a case where since then, I have gotten so much assistance, and I stick to that saying that says it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a child because whilst I was given a second chance, if it is that I didn't have different people from different walks of life to hold my hand during that journey, I would never be able to sit here today and say that it has been a journey and I'm grateful for where I am. I remember going to Murgrove when I passed for the school because I went to Women's Center and I sat the grade 9 achievement test, which is a very funny story because I had baby in January, and normally what happens is that when you have a child, they give you a few months maternity leave and then you go back to school. And I remember going back to school before my time, and I was literally begging them to take me early because I couldn't sit out for too many months because I only had one shot at that grade 9 achievement test. And so whilst I wasn't fully ready to be back in school, that was the only chance I had. And so I decided to go back. And when I sat the grade 9 achievement test, to my surprise, I was awarded a spot at my first choice school, which was at the time Murgrove High School. And it was a bittersweet moment at that time. I'll never forget, because whilst I was so happy that I got scores in the 90s and I passed for the school that I had chosen, I didn't know how I'd get there. I remember going to Dr. Simpson at the time, and I was explaining the situation to her, and Women's Center helped me to reintegrate into the formal school system, not only by way of providing an opportunity or an avenue for me to sit an exam, but also providing financial support at that time, and also mentorship support, because at the end of the day, the psychological aspect of it, or the trauma that you face as a child, it's not something that you automatically outgrow. It's not something that you outgrow readily. As a matter of fact, that's a journey. I don't think we ever outgrow that, even when we become adults. And so I was so happy to go to school, but I was scared too. I mean, wearing the uniform and you're on the road daily, and people who have no idea of who you are or what your unique circumstance is, they'll tell you that you're a part of the problem in Jamaica, and that out of all the things that you could do, if that's really what you chose to do. And so amidst all the negativity that is being thrown at you, it is your duty to remain positive, and that is very difficult. It's very difficult for you to take a bus and people are staring at you. Or if you're pregnant and you need a seat and you can't get it. But at the end of the day, you still have to show up and you still have to go to school. I remember days when I was going to Women's Center and I'd literally have to walk from halfway tree and go up to the center. And I went to school, and lucky enough, they had a lunch program, but I never know how I'd get home for the day. I never knew how I'd get home, but I knew that I'd have to get to school. Once I get there, I mean, I'd have to get back home. And it's a process of planning your goals, and not only planning your goals, but sticking to them irrespective of what happens. And when I got pregnant, it was a clear-cut understanding of what I still needed to do, even though I was pregnant. And so when I went to Mergrove High School, I went there with a mindset that I'd have to get my CXCs and I'd have to make the graduation list. And not only would I have to sit the CXCs, but I'd have to pass them. And I mean, going into an all-girls school, and it's different. I mean, it was a case where I was scared, and being enrolled, I'm sure a lot of us can relate. When you go to a new school, they ask you, which school are you coming from? And I remember sitting in class, and when I sat in class, the teacher said she wants all the new students to tell her which school we're coming from and what we plan to do in the rest of the time that we have at the school. And I was so nervous. I was sweating, because you couldn't just stand up and tell this class that you're coming from Women's Center. I was like, no, I have to sit down and plan this. So I sat there, and when she called me, I didn't even know what to say. And I remember what she said to me. She said, if you can't tell me which school you're coming from, take your bag and leave my class. And I remember taking up my bag and coming out of the class, and I was like, my God, this cannot be it. This cannot be my first week of school. And I remember standing outside, and a classmate of mine, I didn't even know that she knew. She called the teacher outside, and she said, Miss, do you know why Kinsasha couldn't tell you which school she's coming from? And she said, no. She said, Miss, it's because she's coming from Women's Center. She wouldn't want to stand up and tell the entire class. And I remember feeling that sense of support from someone that I didn't even know. It was like a week in school. And from there on, the friendships just grew. The respect was there. I mean, it was as if I was a class mother. So when I went to school, of course, I'm not going to tell these children, go have sex, or I'm not going to tell you how I ended up pregnant. It was more of a support, saying, whoa, you have a child. And if it is that we didn't see him on Facebook, we wouldn't know. Because when I come to school, my focus is different. My focus is to come here and excel so that I can leave with my CXCs. And it's funny enough that when I did the tests in grade 9, I was awarded a spot in 10-1, and I was the only child to leave that class and go to a Stream 1 class for that year. And when I went to the Stream 1 class, it so happened that I was selected to be a sub-prefect. And when I was selected to be a sub-prefect, of course, I was elated. I felt so good because for me, it was a sense of accomplishment. I love to serve. I believe that when I serve it makes me feel different, and there's a lot to learn when you serve. And during that time when I was a sub-prefect, I was also serving nationally because I was an advisor to the then Child Development Agency. And so I had to balance not only being a mother or a teen mother and a student and a prefect, but also a national child advocate. And so it was a difficult process. It was very difficult, not only financially, because going to Murgrove, it wasn't any easier. Because at that time, I didn't get any support from the child's father. But then at the end of the day, I'm a mother. What am I going to do? I have to ensure that I learn, I get to school, and my child is fed. And during that time, as I stated in the interview, my mom wasn't working. And so at that time, it became a thing now when I started to think, and I'm saying, well, I'm not going to ask a man for assistance. That just cannot work. And so I remember even when I left Women's Center, I still got support through them, not only to go to school, but also in kind. I mean, in formula and baby clothes for my son. And so I think that without them, I would never be here. I wouldn't be here to tell the story that I'm telling today. And when I did my mock exams, for Murgrove High School, it's not a case where your CXC determines which certificate you get. It's the mock exams that you do. And in order to get a high school diploma there, you'd have to get a distinction area, at least 60 and over, and 5 other subjects, and you can't fail any of your subjects. And I remember that day when I found out that I got a high school diploma. I was going to get a high school diploma. I cried so much. They were actually wondering if I was happy. I don't think there are any words to mirror how I felt at that point. It's still an emotional thing for me. It's been years, but it's still a very, very emotional thing for me. And so I like to say that even though there were people there that were holding my hand, it's a case where I made the step by faith without seeing the staircase, but God always ensured that there was a staircase in front of me, even when I couldn't see it. I remember when I did my last CXC exam in high school, it was a Friday, and I got called by a ministry office saying that I should come to work on Monday, that I was taken into a summer program. And I remember going into that summer program, and until this day, I have never been unemployed, and that has been years ago. And I have to give thanks because it's the things that we take for granted because they're so small that other people are waiting to get the opportunity to actually excel at. And so I'm proud to know that I am a mother who has been through so much psychologically, financially, and I am still able to not only be a parent to my son, but to also be a role model to him and to be there as the person who he can speak to, and to also be able to share my story with others based on what I would have gone through and how the circumstances were. And I remember, quite frankly, when I went into labor the day I was at school. Man, I love school so much that when I went into labor, I was literally at school the morning. And I remember when I went into labor at school, I was so stressed out. I mean, I didn't have a bag packed at home. I didn't have any nighties. I didn't have anything. And I remember at that point when I was in labor, I said to nurse, I do not have a bag packed. And these counselors were scrambling all over the place to pack a bag so that I could go down to Jubilee. And I remember a counselor took me in and they called my mother and asked her to come down. And my mom came down with stuff for my baby. But the funny thing is, even the stuff that my mom took to the hospital were from Women's Center. Because I remember quite frankly, his father's mother said, them na buy, quote unquote, them na buy no puss in a no bag. So them na buy nothing until them see if the baby look like them son. And so at that time, I didn't have anything at all for him, even at that point. And I remember saying to myself when the counselor was taking me to Jubilee, boy, God good. Because how coincidental it is that I went into labor from school and a bag was packed for me here when I didn't have a bag at home and I didn't have a taxi fare to take me to the hospital. And I remember being there and mom came and she looked and she asked me if it is that I have anything there because there wasn't anything at home. And I said to her, Mom, I got stuff from the counselors and she took me down and she was still there with me until mom came. And looking back at what happened, the series of events and how they happened, I cannot help but to say that God intervened at every single point. He was there, he was very much present. Because I can't see how I would have made it through that situation had it not been for him putting people at different points in my life. I mean, I'm still young because from the video, that was 2015, it's 2021. I'm not a teenager anymore, but I'm still young. But the fact that I was able last year to resign from my 9 to 5, unsure of what was going to happen, but God turned it around in such a way that I'm my own boss. I'm a full-time freelancer and I have a new startup company that I'm working on. And everything fell into place and it exceeded my expectations in such a short space of time. I cannot help but to say that God is good and that the people that he has placed in my life has played a significant role in the village that was needed to grow me as a child. And so it's not a case where I was quote unquote a bad pick-me, or it's a case where it's peer pressure or you run away from home. No, it was never that case. But we're still broad brushed as some girls who are good for nothing and we're running in the wrong direction. And so I love the theme of the presentation, second chance, because in truth and in fact, there are some of us who really need it because that is the moment that we will use to redeem ourselves. And the people who are there in our village help us to be a better version of ourselves. So we do not become a mere statistic, but we become productive people of society who can always stretch our hand down and help another teenage mother up. It's a community and a village. And in closing, I want to say that for me, I didn't know how it was going to turn out, but I showed up every single day. I showed up every single day, whether my son tore up my homework, even though that might sound kind of cliche, he did tear up my homework one day. And I showed up to school nonetheless. I showed up to school and I even brought the torn up pages and I was like, Miss, I wrote a perfectly good essay, but my son tore it up. And she gave me a few days extension. I showed up. I decided not to miss school. I showed up even when school has ended and I had a national duty to be a child advisor. When I was on the weekend or during the week after school, I showed up as a student. I showed up as a parent. I showed up as a sub-prefect. I showed up as an advisor. Because at the end of the day, irrespective of what people have to say about me, one of the things you're not going to be able to say is that I'm not persistent, I'm not determined, and I'm not a go-getter, and I don't show up. So showing up has taken me this far, and I know that I have a lot further to go. And I'm very much grateful for where I am today versus the girl that I was looking at in that video approximately 6 years ago. Thank you so much. for your undivided attention. Back to you, Rochelle.
Thank you so much, Ken Sasha. I mean, that really gave me goosebumps. I know you've been through a lot, and I've said to you before, and I'll keep saying it, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so glad that you've really beaten the odds and you have charted and you are charting your destiny. So God bless you, King Sasha. God bless your son and your family. And we'll be in touch. I don't know if you want to hang around. I'm going to hand over to Natalie so that she can just ask the persons on the platform if they have any questions and just stay around just in case. Thank you so much, King Sasha.
Oh, I am at a loss for words, and that is not something that happens very often for me. That presentation was definitely enlightening, King Sasha. I can't say that I know what you went through, but you inspired me a lot, you know, just reminding me that, you know, we can't always write people off and we should not judge what circumstances led them to where we find them, because sometimes we just find people at a spot in their journey, you know, and we use that little spot to define them as an individual and to define their journey, and we should try our best not to do that. Unfortunately, we are kind of out of time, so we will not be able to take any questions, but I know that Auntie Rachel is always open. And so if you would like to reach out to her, or if you want to reach out to me and I will pass the questions on to her, then we're definitely open to that. Thank you so much, Auntie Rachel, for always being willing and available. I know that you were ill. I found out last week that you had COVID, and she was still texting me about whether or not the program was last week, and I was like, okay, she's very passionate. So I know that you are definitely very passionate about what you do. And we need to be those persons in society who advocate for our children, because if we don't do it, who is going to do it? If we don't do it, then somebody's going to take advantage of them. And those of us who work with young people, whether they're in Sabbath school, Pathfinder, AY, whatever it is, we do these types of presentations because it is necessary for us to understand the society that we live in. Jesus told us that we have to address persons, address their needs, we have to address them where they are at. So you can't go to somebody with food whose major need is shelter. Not that they're not going to take the food, but you're not really addressing the urgent needs. So we have to be observant, we have to be vigilant and look out for our children, look out for our young people. Thank you so much, Auntie Rochelle. Thank you so much, King Sasha, for sharing. I hope that you will continue being a beam in society, and you have given us a lot of hope. I know that you touched a lot of us here this evening. That is it from us, from AYS. Next week, we will continue with our 50th anniversary celebration. So I am going to hand over to the persons in charge of Vespers. I hope that the presentation was beneficial. And if as I said, if there's anything you want to know, or if you have any suggestions for programs that we can do, you can always let us know in the AYS department.
Amen. Thank you very much, Sister Natalie. And others, as was said before and is still being said by others, that it was a very, very beneficial program. And I want to join you, Sister Mackenzie, because sometimes we do these programs and people wonder why we do them. We can't be so heavenly minded that we are no earthly good. And sometimes that's where a number of persons are. They're so heavenly minded that they are no earthly good. And I'd say to you, we have been hearing the stories. The stories are horrible. The stories of what is happening to our children. Our children are being abused abused in ways that are unimaginable, even death. We know of at least one case now that is in the courts, a young man that was beaten to death, and there are others, and there are those who are being gunned down like adults are being gunned down. And so, God is gonna call us up as a nation for the way that we are treating our children. We are not being the kind of people that God truly wants us to be. We thank God for those who are extending themselves to care for our children, as Sister Rochelle and others are doing. We sing to close for our Vespers, 6:55. Happy the home when God is there. 6:55. Is there anybody who is able to sing? Sister Ball, you want to sing that for us? Okay, well, my wife is having challenge. Is there anybody else who wants to
What number,
sing that song?
Pastor?
6:55. Happy the home when God is there.
Okay. Happy the home when God is there and love fills every breast. When one their wish and one their prayer and one their heavenly rest. Happy the home where Jesus' name is sweet to every ear, where children early lisp his fame and parents hold him dear. Happy the home where prayer is heard and praise is wont to rise, where parents love the sacred word and all its wisdom prize. Lord, let us in our homes agree this blessed peace to gain. Unite our hearts in love to thee, and love to all will reign.
Amen. Thank you very much, Sister Dale. In Matthew 18, verses 4 and 5, or rather 5 and 6. Jesus said, and whoso shall receive one such little child in my name, receive me. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hung about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Let us pray. Father, even as we open your words and look in your words now, I ask, oh Lord, that you will be with us. In Jesus' name, amen. I heard earlier, as I listened to Sister Rochelle doing that presentation, Sister Garden, she made mention of the fact that a number of things she did not know until she was of a certain age because of how she was taught by her parents. And I can relate to that. And a number of us can relate to that. When we were growing up, things were different. Things were much different than they are now. Nevertheless, we went through a lot. As I was taking somebody home today, the person shared something with me, and I won't say now, but I began to tell the person my story growing up as a child, that I went through a lot in life. But growing up, I was not able to process the things that I was going through because we took it for granted that that's just the way the world is. Some persons are rich, some persons are poor, some persons are treated bad, some persons are abused, some persons are loved. And we just accepted that, hey, that's the way the world is. And sort of things that I went through in life, it is when, as a man now, I am looking back, I am able to identify those things as abused. Now, while I was growing up, I probably, as I've said before, didn't pay much attention to them. But every now and then, as certain things take place in my life, I can go back to something in my childhood and I can relate that thing that I am now experiencing, that thing that is now bothering me, that issue I am now having. I can relate that thing to something that took place in my life. And so, although I was not aware that the things that were taking place in my life back then, that they were either negative or positive, I didn't know the impact they were having on my life. They have served to make me who I am today, and some things good and some things bad. And I wish I could have avoided the bad things. And so here we are today. We're in a different world. We are more knowledgeable now about the things about us. We have a responsibility not to be as our foreparents, but we have a responsibility to take care of our children and take better care of our children. And so the Lord tells us that children are so valuable to Him that it is better than that a millstone, a stone weighing 70 pounds, be tied around your neck and you be thrown into the depths of the sea and be drowned than for you to offend one of the least of those children who belong to Him. So, my brothers and my sisters, we need to be more caring and sharing and be more mindful of the things around us. And there's anyone here who is engaged in any form of abuse, you're abusing your children in one way or the other, whether it's emotional abuse or verbal abuse or physical abuse or sexual abuse, whatsoever that abuse is, I urge you in the name of Jesus to stop it now. We are here to protect our children. We are here to give them the life that some of us did not have. We may have been abused, and we know how terrible being abused is. Let us not continue abusing our children. Let us break the cycle of abuse. Let us make this country and the world a better place. What is happening to our children now is unforgiving. What our nation is doing to our children, murdering them, sexually abusing them. As Sister Rochelle made mention of what takes place in some of the so-called, I don't like to call anywhere ghetto because the whole world is a ghetto. So, but we know what is happening in some of the areas. If you're in any of those areas and your child is a target of any man or any woman, it's better you move out of the area because you need to protect your child. No matter how much you love the man, no matter how much a man is providing for his family, your children come first. I remember having had to talk to a young lady about, she called me to talk to me about her husband. And I said to her, lady, you should have left the area. You should have done something about the situation a long time ago. And I can tell you that a few months after the lady saw me and is then I found out that the lady was upset with what I said because I said they should have turned the man away a long time ago. So her husband, she's saying, is a good provider, but a good provider was a pervert who was molesting his own child. That's not somebody to stay with because you are there to protect your child and you can't expose your child to things like that. And so, I said to her, I have no apology of saying what I said to you. You told me that your gentleman is a pervert. You told me that he was peeping on his daughter at night. You told me that he sent X-rated video to your daughter's phone. You told me all of those things. So how could I ever say to you otherwise? So, there are some things I don't apologize about. And so, my brothers and my sisters, let us do better by our children because God is expecting better from us. Let us pray. Father, thank you for the blessings of the day. Thank you for the way that you have led us and continue to lead us as a church. May we be more caring and sharing, and may we do better by our children. May we love them more. May we care for them more. May we protect them more. May we understand them and work with them better. Forgive us, oh God, where we have failed thee. We have not all been the best parents, but oh Lord, you are ready at all times to forgive us for our shortcomings and our failures. Now, Father, as we go through the untried days of the week, I ask, oh Lord, that you will take us safely. And I pray for that young lady who testified just now. Thank you, oh God, for the way that you have brought her out of a situation that could have been otherwise. And thank you, oh God, for the way she's shining. And I pray, oh God, that her life will be in harmony with your will. And so that when time on earth shall be no more, and you shall have come for your people, that we all will be safe in your kingdom. I pray for Brent and for Rochelle Garden, that you'll continue to place your hands of healing upon them and restore them to full health. And the others, persons who are tested positive also. Thank you again for hearing. Keep us safe in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. God bless you and thank you very much again, AY and everybody.
When Sabbath here shall end, and from these courts we move, may we an endless Sabbath spend.
Glory for me, glory for me. When by his grace I shall look on his face, that will be glory, big glory for me.